Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Sergeant Angela Willits. We warmly welcome the family of Lieutenant Alfred Herbert Bond, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following school. From the Northern Territory, Catherine's School of the Air, Primary Department. Invite you all now to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is birth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Alfred Herbert Bond. Alfred Herbert Bond was born in Sydney in 1888, the eldest son of Ernest and Emma Bond of Woorolwolgan near Casino in New South Wales. When the First World War began, Alfred was living in Western Australia with his wife Lavina working as a hardware assistant. Alfred Bond enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in August 1915, and after undergoing an extended period of training, during which he reached the rank of sergeant, embarked from Fremantle for England in June 1916. Alfred was in the 44th Battalion, part of the 11th Brigade of the 3rd Australian Division, a unit known as Old Bill's 1000, after its commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel William Mansbridge. Bond arrived in England in July 1916, where he undertook further training before departing for France and the Western Front. Alfred and the 44th Battalion arrived at the front just in time for the terrible winter of 1916 and 1917, and spent their first 3 months either manning the front lines or resting and training behind the lines. During this period, Alfred clearly distinguished himself, and he was promoted to second lieutenant on the 17th of January. On the 13th of March, sections of the 44th Battalion took part in a daring raid near Armentières in northern France. At 11:40 p.m, with the support of rolling barrage artillery and smokescreen fire, Australian troops began an attack on German trenches. In incredibly muddy conditions, the troops moved nearly 50 metres across no man's land before reaching German barbed wire. They then came under extremely heavy German machine gun and high explosive artillery fire that inflicted severe casualties. They tried to press forwards towards the enemy lines, but a flooded ditch blocked their progress. Only the southern flank of the attack was able to enter the enemy trenches. The attack was a fiasco, and shortly after it began, battalion commanders ordered Australian troops to withdraw. During the raid, in the midst of heavy German fire, Bond organised a small party to rescue 2 wounded comrades. As he was returning, he noticed a 17-man German patrol seeking to disrupt Australian actions. He immediately organised a fighting patrol, returned to no man's land, and, despite the heavy machine gun fire, successfully drove off the Germans, allowing the wounded men to escape. His superior officer wrote of his conduct, "In his gallantry and devotion to duty, he is worthy of every commendation. He set a magnificent example to his men." In June 1917, Bond took part in the Battle of Messines in Belgium and was wounded in a gas attack. His injuries were so severe that he spent nearly 3 months recovering in hospital. Bond returned to his unit on the 1st of September 1917, and 10 days later was promoted to lieutenant. On the 6th of October, the 44th Battalion was taking part in an attack on German lines at Poperinghe, near Ypres, when it came under heavy German artillery and machine gun fire. Bond received a gunshot wound to the back that fractured his pelvis. He was immediately sent to the 11th Australian Field Ambulance, and his injuries were so severe that he was eventually sent to a major military hospital in Bologna. But he was unable to recover from his injuries and died on the 12th of October. Survived by his grieving wife Lavina and infant child Mavis, who would never know her father, Alfred Bond was 30 years old. At the time of his death, Alfred's brother Douglas was recovering from gunshot wounds to his head and shoulder in a nearby field hospital. Douglas would survive the war. Alfred is buried in Bologna Eastern Cemetery, along with over 5,500 Commonwealth soldiers of the First World War. Lieutenant Alfred Herbert Bond is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed this evening beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Alfred Herbert Bond, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.